Hi, this is the Greek video version of the final installment of Acts 7 for this week, in my understanding. And I'm going to do it a little bit differently today. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, I'm going to both do the Greek and a little bit of commentary. And then there's also the podcast that's just the audio version on Patreon. Okay, well, let's go ahead. Now, as Des always posts positive, it doesn't come where it's supposed to. Now, as the time drew near, or was drawing near, this is the subject because it's in the nominative case. I know that because the endings. This is imperfect. The word is engidzo, so it's basically the present stem with an augment, epsilon's augment to an eta. And now, as the time was drawing near, the time of the promise, this is genitive, the time of the promise. What promise are we talking about here? I assume that we're talking about the promise of Israel coming back out of Egypt, that they will come back and inhabit the land, which again fits in with the theme in the book of Acts, that God's people often are not in a place. They're often displaced and in this earth. They're often exiled. The time of promise approached that God confessed to Abraham. There's a little textual variation among the manuscripts. Some manuscripts, I think, have swore, which God swore to Abraham here. But this is the reading that seems more bizarre. And with textual criticism, you go with a more difficult reading as the more likely original. That is to say, copyists were more likely to fix a text than to intentionally mess it up, in the same way that, I comb my hair far more than I go around just messing it up. This is a relative pronoun, time of the promise that the Lord confessed to Abraham. This is genitive because of peer pressure, because its antecedent, the promise, is next to it, and it's genitive. That's something Greek does, strangely. I guess we do those sorts of things in English too. This confessed, homologeo, is a strange word. This particular form is aorist. Nu with an epsilon in front of it is a movable nu, so it's meaningless. Epsilon is a very common third-person singular past tense active indicative ending, and the omicron on homologeo has lengthened, augmented, we say, to an omega. All of those things tell me that this is aorist. There's no particular deep meaning to the aorist. The aorist just says it happened. God did it. God confessed, but it happened. That God confessed to Abraham as this was happening. So this is all kind of giving us conditions of the main clause, which is here. The people increased. Notice these are. I suppose this is an argument for a source. You could make an argument for a source because the verbs come first, which is a very Hebrew way to do it. The people increased and were multiplied in Egypt. So this is also aorist. It has that same set of sen. See the sen at the end? Eventually, if you look at Greek enough, when you see sen on the end of a word, you should think, oh, I bet this is aorist active indicative third person singular from some word. The word is auxano, is it? Aux is increase. See if I can find it real quick. Yes, auxano, to grow. A xi is the key to a hidden sigma. Actually, in this case, this xi is part of the word. It's not a wig. It's the real hair. Auxano, but an alpha has been lengthened to an eta by augmenting. The people increased and were multiplied in Egypt. This is aorist passive. Theta eta is aorist passive. So what is going on here? Well, Stephen is telling the story, and he's been accused of speaking words against Moses. So he seems to be pretty positive toward Moses here, and I think that is one of the points of this passage here. Verse 18, akrihu, until aneste basileus heteros, until a different king arose. This is anistemi, to stand up. Okay, different king, stand up. This is also aorist. The stay is a telltale sign of histemi. in Egypt. Okay. Who, this is a relative pronoun, who did not know Joseph. Of course, this is virtually a quote from Genesis. Then there arose a king, and of course, then the order makes sense, right? The Hebrew order of this expression makes sense. The verb first and then the subject, because this is a virtual quote from the Septuagint. And of course, Luke is a smart cookie. I mean, the author of Acts is a smart guy, or gal if it's a girl. But anyway, I'll just call him Luke. And so there may, just because it follows a Hebrew order, you can kind of get this feel in the same way that someone might imitate someone else, or feign an Irish accent, So Luke can Septuagintalize, learn how to Septuagintalize if he reads the Septuagint long enough, because it would have been striking to a Greek speaker. What's with the order of the words in the Septuagint? Okay. He did not know. This is oida. Oida is a weird word. We think of it as being perfect in form, but present in meaning. So this is the pluperfect form, but past tense in meaning. I don't know why they say that, to be honest, but that's what they say. I know a little bit. Okay, verse 19. This one, demonstrative pronoun, having tricked or having been crafty with our race. Interesting word here. Katasophisto. Let me make sure that's katasophizomai. You can hear the word sophist in the middle there. A sophist was a wise guy. Some probably consider me a sophist. That you got to watch that shank. He's tricky. But basically, what this is saying is Pharaoh pulled one over on the Israelites. I wonder, there's a number of contexts here. One is the context of Stephen with the Sanhedrin. The other is the context of Luke with Theophilus and Luke with his audience. But is Stephen saying something to the high priest here? You guys have been duped by Pharaoh, by the Romans. You're on the wrong team. Our race, you guys are our race, and you've been hoodwinked. Okay, so this one, having hoodwinked our race, he did evil to our fathers. There are some manuscripts that have our fathers here. The text in front of me has left it out. He did evil to the fathers in order to make the babies exposed. This is not pulling their diapers down. This is the ancient practice of taking a child you didn't want and discarding them outside to where they die because of exposure to the elements. This, of course, reminds us of the story of Oedipus in the Greek kind of world. A genitive article with the infinitive is an infinitive game of purpose or result. So in order to make the babies. This is accusative plural. Neuter plural alpha, that's easy enough. But this is one of those neuter plural forms that has an eta. They're very annoying. Ektheta, put out, exposed. Now, I'm not sure, as I recall, the Exodus story doesn't talk about. I don't think the Exodus story says that's how they were killed. If I remember correctly, you might double check me. But I don't think that the Exodus story tells us exactly how they were killed. Anyway, in order for them not to live, yes. So we're not putting them outside because they need a tan. This is putting them outside in order that they might die. This is another infinitive of purpose game. Ace ta infinitive. This is an infinitive. Literally into the not to live. And the word here is zoogoneo, which my Greek dictionary over here says, ha, 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 staying alive. So in order that they might not stay alive. Okay, so we move on to our Other verses for today. It's a short paragraph, although I seem to be stretching this out painfully long. Verse 20. In time, Moses was born. Again, funny order here. Verb first, then the subject. In time, Moses was born, and he was good looking. He was osteos. He was excellent. He was a fine young man. I'm sorry. These are some of the connotations of the word, but here he was handsome before the Lord. He was pleasing before the Lord, maybe is better translation. He was pleasing before the Lord, before God, who, relative pronoun, was nurtured for 3 months. This is aorist passive. It's a second aorist passive form because it doesn't have the theta. Normally there'd be a theta there. So anatrepho. So he was nurtured for 3 months in the house of his father. So for 3 months, they didn't really listen to the command of the king. Now, this is a very interesting word here. Now, him having been exposed, the daughter of Pharaoh took him up. You know how anybody want to pick up that card? The daughter of Pharaoh picks up Moses. But what's weird about this, ektithemi is related to this word ektheta. You can see it. So it almost sounds like they conformed to the order of the king. Now, that's not at all the sense that I get necessarily from Exodus. Well, it's not. It's not the sense you get from Exodus. But it almost sounds like they conform to the powers that be. And there is a theme in the book of Acts, I would say, that Christians are law-abiding citizens. I really do think that the book of Acts, especially when we get a little bit later on, I really think that the book of Acts, and I didn't come up with this, portrays Christians as peace-loving and law-abiding citizens, which I think is true. But in order to kind of present that resume of the early church, probably some of the conflict in the early church is toned down a little bit. We see this especially in the conflict between Peter and Paul at Antioch, which is very important, I think, to the story of the early church, but is not mentioned at all in the book of Acts, at least not in its strong form. And so we get the impression, and we'll see this as we continue to go, that Acts downplays some of the conflicts. I mean, it's not that it doesn't tell us about conflict, but it kind of tones it down a little bit. This is not, I don't consider this bad. I mean, when you go for a job interview and everything goes great, you don't have to stop and say, now, wait a minute, there's some dirt on me you don't know, or here's some of the things that people criticize me about. I mean, just because because Acts is putting forward what the church is supposed to be, right? And so the idea that Acts would present a somewhat idealized picture of the church, to me, is appropriate, because what is Acts? Part of the point of Acts is to tell the church what it's supposed to be like. And so, but anyway, I wonder if this is implying that in the end, they actually did obey the order of the king. Anyway, something to chew about. This is a genitive absolute, noun or pronoun in the genitive, participle in the genitive. This becomes the subject. Him, having been exposed, my aunt is a participle, but the theta epsilon says my aunt is an aorist passive participle. Os, arkonantos, is a genitive masculine singular ending. Okay, so him, having been exposed, the daughter of Pharaoh took him up. Sometimes this means kill, but it doesn't mean kill here. It means more like adopts or takes him up from anairo. Anireo. Okay. And she nurtured him. So this is the same word that was used. This is the same word as up here, where his mother, his parents nurture him. He was nurtured for 3 months with his family, but now she nurtured him. C is the key to hidden sigma, so we have a hidden sigma alpha. This is indeed aorist. There's the augment hiding after the compound preposition at the front. To amenu eto. It's a third person singular. So this is an aorist middle indicative third person singular from anatrepho. The theta goes breathy. The tau goes breathy. Who knew? Okay, she nurtured him by herself as a son. Now it's interesting here that the king's plan backfires on him, right? Because the number one person the Pharaoh should want to get is the person that survives. Oops, I guess God's in control. Verse 22, and Moses was instructed, theta eta, so that's aorist passive. Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of Egypt, which, and he, oh no, I'm sorry. This is the imperfect of Amy. He was powerful. He was dynamite in words and his deeds. So the book of Acts and Stephen here seems to have a fairly positive view of the wisdom of Egypt here. That's not all bad. And of course, this would be similar to what we find among certain Jews who lived in Egypt, like Artapanus or Aristeas or Philo, Aristobulus. So there was a tradition at Alexandria, especially in Egypt, that viewed Greek wisdom very positively. In fact, some of them said that Plato and Pythagoras got their ideas from Moses. You know, we invented it. You know, oh, you tell me any word and I show you how it goes back to Greek. In this case, how it goes back to Moses. Well, I hope you have a lovely weekend. For those of you patrons out there, I haven't quite figured out what I'll do tomorrow for our patrons only post, but I'll come up with something. But thank you. This has been my suggestion for a new format with the Greek, in which I do both commentary and the Greek, so it's a little bit longer. Thank you.